This video is a lecture, and I'm only going to watch parts of it. Oh yeah, I'm going to need this up. I took notes about what parts I wanted to be able to find. Because we're not going to watch the whole thing. The whole thing is an hour and 43 minutes. And there's a ton of background, and I'm going to skip most of the background. He gives a lot of... So he's lecturing about the Crusades, and there are multiple parts. I think there are 4 parts. There might be more. And this one is about the First Crusade. And he gives a ton of background at the beginning, which is good, actually. I think it's good to give a lot of background to contextualize the Crusades. But we're going to skip most of that background. But I am going to... There is 1 or 2 things... Actually, wait, 3, 4... There are a few spots in where he's going over the background that I want to highlight so we can get a sense of his approach to history education, I guess you could say. I've heard mixed things about him. Yeah, I had heard mixed things about him. And then I watched his lecture, and now I have no mixed feelings about him. They're very negative. No, if you go to Austin Community College, do not take a history course from him. Don't bother. That's my takeaway. Peer review. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a peer review. It's going to be a scathing. Some peer reviews can be pretty scathing. This one's going to be kind of scathing. I caught a couple of inaccuracies, but I imagine a lot of the factual stuff went over my head. Yeah, he oversimplifies a lot. That's true. That's true. But it gets worse. It's worse than just oversimplification. All right, so we're going to start with... So, like I said, this is about the First Crusade, and he gives a bunch of background. And right here in this stage, we're going to go to minute 38. Where am I? Minute 38. At this point in the lecture, he's talking about the Vikings, which you might think, well, what do the Vikings have to do with the Crusades? What he's doing is he's talking about the Vikings in order to talk about the Normans, in South Italy and Sicily, which, of course, is directly relevant to the Crusades, because Bohemond of Taranto and Tankred came from that area, and they were Normans. All right, so let's listen to what he says at this stage, talking about the Vikings.
So pretty much all you could do was raise cattle and go fishing. And at some point, their population had reached a threshold. They had sort of reached the carrying capacity of cheese rolls and dried fish. And when that happened, they had no choice but to start looking for alternatives. And they took 2 approaches, by the way. One approach the Vikings did was they set out to start trading. They thought, you know what, we can fix our problem if we can do trade because we'll have the money to buy the food that we need. And the Eastern Vikings, the Swedes, got so into this, they actually started trying to figure out where they could go to, and they started reading their sagas. This is the 8th century. They're not reading their sagas, they were oral histories. They were listening to their sagas. And the sagas told the Vikings that the place the Germans were from was Iran. By the way, Kerman Iran, which is where we get the word German, because G and K, when languages change over time, are interchangeable. So Kerman, German. We say German because we pronounce it like a French person would. But a German says German, right? Like, so if you're saying the study of Germanic studies, it's Germanismus. Because they don't say it the way a French person would. So the sagas tell the Vikings, you're originally from Persia. So the Swedes go, wow, that's...
Okay, that's a bunch of BS. The etymology of German has nothing to do with the city of Kerman in Iran. It's just no relation at all. At best, that's a folk etymology, in the sense that it's a false etymology. It's not real. But I'm not a Norse expert, so I can't speak to the saga aspect of it, and whether there were sagas, but yeah, the etymology thing is not real. Okay, Sousa, I'm currently reading The Crusades by Thomas Asbridge. Have you read it? I've read parts of it. It's good. Asbridge is totally cool. Like, he's a very good source. It's a good overview. It's a little long, obviously. I mean, you would know that since you're reading it. I pulled some books off my shelf because I was like fact checking his stuff. I was like, wait, every once in a while I'd be watching lecture. I'd be like, wait, is that how it happened? And I'd go and check. But since I have this book handy, I'll show this to you. Let me look at OBS so I can make sure that yeah. So if you want a shorter introduction, this is the one I recommend. This was the textbook one of the textbooks I would use in my class. Concise History of the Crusades by Thomas F. Madden. Asbridge is also good, but he's more detailed. It's longer. It's lots more detail. If you want a quick overview, and the advice I always gave people was start with something short to get like a structure in your head or like a framework, timeline in your head, and then dive in. So if you're reading Asbridge and you're enjoying it, by all means, keep reading. If you're reading it and you're feeling like you're getting bogged down and there are too many names and it's hard to keep track of all the stuff that's going on, and then maybe take a break, read this, and then go back and read Asbridge. And it'll be easier to keep track of all the people, because you'll have some baseline built in now. So we're gonna jump ahead a little bit, and he's gonna do a little tangent. He like as you go along in the video, he'll go on these little tangents, and he has one about the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So let me go here.
So Norman mercenaries start to travel from northern France all the way to southern Italy, and they're being used by everybody. They're being used by the Romans, who are trying to hold on to southern Italy. They had it, they're losing it, they're trying to get it back. There's the Roman emperor at the time is a guy named Basil II. You want to laugh, but he was one of the greatest Roman emperors of the time period. And he went on a conquering spree, and he starts carving up territory that the Romans had lost, and he's putting it back in, including taking lands, Muslim lands. He actually brings the Roman Empire back to Syria, and he captures Antioch and the northern end of Syria. The part of Syria that today is in Turkey is basically what he recaptured. So when the Ottoman Empire broke up, the Europeans showed up with a crayon and a napkin, and they just began drawing borders. And you look at the border between Saudi Arabia and Jordan, or Jordan and Iraq, and you're like, why'd you do that? And they sneezed or something. Somebody got bumped and an extra wiggle line popped up. And they did that with Syria. They just chopped off the northern part.
Okay, so he says the Byzantines reconquered Antioch, and then he mentions the geography of Antioch, which is that it's in there's this little divot. There's this little extension of Turkey off the southern edge of Turkey. That's where Antioch is located, and that's because of like it's all that's part's true. Like the little boundary, there were after World War I, they were redrawing the boundaries of the Middle East, and at first they drew the northern border of Syria went straight across to the Mediterranean, to that little northeast corner of the Mediterranean, and then they changed it and they did a little whip and made Antioch part of Turkey. So there, I don't really have a quibble with that. I mean, in the context of this, all this entire anecdote, this little entire tangent in the context of the lecture is he's just explaining where Antioch is located, and that reminds him of this Sykes-Picot thing. And of course, he's into modern Middle East. I think that's kind of his shtick, is modern Middle East. That's his like area of expertise, and so he's bringing it reminds him of that, and so he has this little tangent. But the part I wanted to note was he says like why are the lines so strange and arbitrary? Like they'll be straight lines, but they'll also have these little weird zigzags. And he's like, oh, it's because they would sneeze and they would bump the line, which is an obvious joke, right? So it's harmless. Like you can tell watching, this is just a joke. It's obviously not real. But I wanted to kind of note that for later as we move forward, because the more and more I watched, the more I was like, oh, is all of this stuff just these little jokes, like people sneezing, the Sykes-Picot sneeze, like is all of them like all the like, 'cause he'll put these little funny anecdotes or these little asides, and it's not always clear. Like, he makes it sound like it actually happened that way. It'll become more clear as we go along. But I wanted to pick this out because this is like an obvious case where he's just making it up, and everybody knows that, you know, the audience is in on it, the students are in on it, they know he's just joking. Are you going to put this VOD on YouTube hidden like you did with the Federalist? Nope, it is not going on YouTube. No, it'll be on here. It'll be on Twitch, and that's all. Okay, let's jump ahead now to the next anecdote. And so here's he's doing another aside. And here he's talking about the papacy. I can't remember the exact context.
In 1095, the Pope holds two conventions. I think both of them were in November. And Alexius Komnenos, Alexius I, the Roman Emperor, comes to Italy. And this isn't a small thing, because Italy isn't Roman. In fact, the Pope in Rome and the Roman Empire have had a falling out that has lasted centuries, and they hate each other's guts a lot, not a little bit, a lot. So what happened was, as the Roman Empire was disintegrating, they managed to hold on to pieces of Italy, including the city of Rome.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to remember all the stuff he's getting wrong, so I'm going to pause here and say, so he's referring to, he said that the Pope held two conventions. He's referring to the Council of Clermont, which was in November of 1095, and I think he's also referring, there was a council in northern Italy the year before. I think it was in 1094. It was like Piacenza or something. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was called. And both of those are seen as leading up to the call of the First Crusade, but particularly the second one, the Council of Clermont. That's where the call of the First Crusade happened. So that's the context, like that, you know, he's kind of alluding to things that actually happened. But then he's going to talk about the Great Schism of 1054, and he'll accidentally say the wrong date. Don't worry, it's fine. But so there was a schism in 1054. He's mischaracterizing the schism. Maybe it's not worth going into that. But just know you need to take everything he says about the schism with a grain of salt. He's trying to be the Richard Feynman for history. Maybe so, yeah. All right, yeah, so let's keep going with the Great Schism.
But the Pope in Rome didn't like that, because the original church had 5 patriarchs. So the Orthodox Catholic Church, Orthodox is truth, Catholic is universal. So the Universal Truth Church, that was the original name of the Christian church. It had already had a schism. The Copts in Egypt had broken away in 284. But
I mean, 284 is the year. So the Copts use a different calendar. They don't use, like most Christians use this calendar that, like, so that right now is 2025. The Coptic Church, though, uses a different calendar. They don't count from the purported date of the birth of Christ. They count from the Diocletian persecution. From, I think 284 is when Diocletian came to power. I think that's right. So yeah, their numbers are a little bit lower for their years. That's not when they broke off. They broke off after the Council of Chalcedon in 451. That's the traditional date for when the Coptic Church becomes a separate thing.
In the 700s, the church was still unified. But the Pope in Rome came to resent the circumstances, because the 5 patriarchs were the Pope in Rome, the Pope in Alexandria, the Patriarch of Antioch, and the Patriarch of Constantinople, and the Archbishop of Jerusalem. In other words, the original Christian church had 5 heads. 2 popes, 2 patriarchs, and an archbishop. By the way, Pope came...
Oh, yeah, this is the part I was going to... But just as an aside, he's talking about the 5 patriarchs. This is a simplification, but it's not necessarily one I would object to. But you do need to, like, hopefully as a student sitting in that class, you would understand he's simplifying it for the sake of brevity. It's not exactly true that the early church had 5 heads. It's a little bit of I don't think I would phrase it that way, because I'd be afraid that might give the wrong impression. But yes, there were 5 patriarchs, and they're all bishops. Yeah, so archbishop and patriarch and pope are all just special titles for bishops. Yeah, that's they're just bishops. So the Pope of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, has the special title of Pope. The Bishop of Alexandria in the Coptic Church, who he lives in Cairo, but his title is Patriarch of is Pope. Actually, his title's Pope. Is the point I was getting at. So, in the head of the Coptic Church, the earthly head, I should say. You know, Christians believe that Jesus is the head of the church, but the earthly head of the Coptic Church is he's referred to as a pope, but that's because he's his job is Bishop of Alexandria. Yeah, anyway, so here's where he explains, let me back up a sec. Yeah. He's going to talk about the etymology. Here's another etymology. The etymology of the word pope.
2 popes, 2 patriarchs, and an archbishop. By the way, pope came from, the pope would have his child on his knee, and then people would come to kiss his ring, and they would hear the child saying, Papa, Papa, and that just stuck. Do you want me to say that again? The pope would have his child on his knee. You know, his kid, because the original Catholic Church didn't have a celibacy thing. They did the celibacy thing later.
Okay, I have to address the celibacy thing too. I know, huh? Exactly, huh? What? Yeah, I know. Like, okay, so, no, complete 100% bull crap. That's bull crap. That's, and I don't know, like, so what actually happened was, in general, like, bishops would be referred to with, kind of in an endearing is not the right word. Like people would, like, the flock would call them Papa, or, you know, Dad in modern American English. But, you know, they'd like the informal word for father. This was pretty widespread in the early church in the century, like it begins in the 2nd or 3rd century, or at least that's our earliest attestation for it. And then throughout the first millennium, it was, you know, pretty common in different places. In the Western Church, which was directly under the authority of the Patriarch of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, they would the term Papa ceased to be used for other bishops, and it kind of over time it started to be used exclusively for the Bishop of Rome. But in the Eastern Church, they would still use it more widely. That's why the Bishop of Alexandria in the Coptic Church is also referred to as Pope or Papa. That's it. It has nothing to do with celibacy. It has nothing to do with the Pope having his. And by the way, if that were true, that would actually be commendable. A father taking an interest in his children and, like, you know, bring your child to work day, you know, and, like, you know, it kind of goes against the patriarchal norm of the wife taking care of the kids somewhere else while the dad goes to work and be, you know, as Pope, you know. Yeah, I'd love to be this self-confident. I know, like, he's saying that, and like, does he not know that, like, is there, like, that, I'm struggling with this. Does he not have the self-awareness to be like, that sounds a little crazy, maybe check, maybe look that up? Or at least, at the very least, to be able to anticipate, what if a student comes up to you after class and is like, where'd you get that? Is that, like, I want to read more about that. Can you point me to something? You need to be able to back that up. What is that based on? Source, I just made it up. Well, we'll be coming to that later. There's and then he does the celibacy. He talks about the celibacy stuff, and he actually, I have heard this before. He says, I'll just summarize it, I guess, but he says that the Catholic Church started doing priestly celibacy because they didn't want priests to hand their churches on to their successors, and, like, they didn't want children to be inheriting priestly office, or like like churches from their fathers or whatever. And that's not the case. That's not true. That's one of those common myths about the Middle Ages that circulates. But we can skip him telling him that, but I mean, at least he has the excuse that it's a common myth that circulates a lot. He's teaching outside of his field, right? Because his expertise is in poli-sci, modern Middle East. He's not a medieval historian. He's not a historian of the Crusades. He's teaching outside of his field. So we should make some allowances. He's going to make mistakes, that's inevitable. So he talks about the People's Crusade, which is one of the stages of the First Crusade. A bunch of people kind of went before the leaders were ready to go. So they just went, and they got to Constantinople. They crossed the Bosporus, and then not long after, the Turks massacred them. But they were trying to get to Nicaea, the city of Nicaea.
Alexius Komnenos is like, I got to get rid of these guys as fast as I can. He goes, you know what you got to do? You got to cross the Bosporus. Here's my fleet. He puts them on a ship, and he sends them across the Bosporus, and they set up a camp. They actually attack a town. They capture it. And he's like, I'll send you food. You just stay on your side of the Bosporus. This is going to work out great. In the meantime, he's actually calling the Turks on the phone. Hey, there's some crazy dudes. I just deposited them on your end. Good luck with that. The guy who's now the son of Suleiman I, his name is Khalid Arslan. He decides he's got to get rid of these guys. And they want to take Nicaea. So Nicaea is pronounced Nicaea. I'm going to not say Nicaea again for the rest of the lecture. It drives me nuts. It's like Julius Caesar is Gaius Julius Caesar. Stop saying Julius Caesar. I feel like it could be a salad dressing or something. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be the name of that guy. Nicaea was the capital for the Sultanate of Rome. So they actually put it like almost across from Constantinople. And the reason is because that's their goal. It's Constantinople. They're nowhere near capturing it. They know that. But that's still, it's nice to have a goal, even if it's a far off one. And so they've got nice, I did it, Nicaea. It's like poison.
Okay, so he objects to saying Nicaea because that's not the correct pronunciation, right? Nicaea, my understanding in Greek, it's Nikaea with stress on the first syllable, but whatever. So he's basically trying to say that the Greek pronunciation is the correct pronunciation. You should pronounce the city the way it's pronounced in Greek. To the point where he says, you must not say Nicaea. I will never say Nicaea. If I say Nicaea, it drives me nuts when people say Nicaea. And then he says it later on. Oh, it's poison. In that same little clip, he talks about Constantinople. And he doesn't say Constantinopolis. Later on, actually, and earlier, we heard him say Antioch. He doesn't say Antiochia. Those are the Greek pronunciations of those cities. I just find it so striking that he's really going hard on this. Like, this is really important to me. We got to pronounce this stuff correctly, and correctly is how it's pronounced in Greek. But it's only for this particular city and none of the other cities I'm going to talk about in this lecture. What? That's so weird. And then this morning, I was started watching the other, I think it was Ibn Sina, right, on Discord. I think he was the one that wanted me to watch these things. So I started watching this one, How Islam Saved Western Civilization. And he starts out by talking about the Council of Nicaea. But here he's pronouncing it Nicaea. And so I looked at the date, September 2022. This one is March of 2023. So sometime between September of 2022 and March of 2023, he got into his head that you must never say Nicaea, you must say Nicaea. But only that city. Who was the guy in the First Crusade who found a holy spear and then did a trial by fire when people called him out? And I don't remember the name, but there was like a monk or something who claimed to find it. And then there was argumentation. Different factions were arguing about it, and it was kind of political. Now, sometimes in the way he talks about that incident, and he does, of course, the classic thing where he just characterizes everybody as a bunch of superstitious fools. And that's not how people were in the Middle Ages. They did not just uncritically accept any claim of miracle or miraculousness or relics or anything. They weren't always, they didn't do that. They did have critical thinking. They just operated with different assumptions than we have. But yeah, people at the time, when they found the Holy Lance, you know, a random rusty old lance head, I think it was under the floor of the church. Actually, it might have been planted, because I think what happened was this guy, I can't remember his name, he claimed to have had a dream where he was shown the location of the Holy Lance, and it was under the church floor. I think I'm remembering that correctly. And so they were like digging down. So like, how would they know? Like, how would he know that it's even there? So there's speculation. Of course, we have no idea, but it's possible he may have planted it. You know, they dug down a ways, and he's like, wait, let me go check. And he like slipped it out of his pocket or something. That's probably what happened. But or maybe it's the real Holy Lance. The thing was, there already was a Holy Lance in Constantinople. This was part of the problem with that incident, by the way. We're kind of on a whole tangent. We're not even talking about the video. But they had just gone to Constantinople. I guess by this point, it had been a year or two since they'd been to Constantinople. While they were there, many of them were able to go into the city and do pilgrimage, because there were a bunch of churches that had relics. Constantinople had a Holy Lance. So it's like, now they're in Antioch, and they're talking about, oh, I found the Holy Lance. And they're like, dude, we just saw it. It's in Constantinople. Anyway. But yeah, there was a whole thing. This guy must have gotten his degree with misleading people on what YouTube Shorts in mind. So many of my friends send me his videos, and I have to explain to almost never listen to what this guy says. Yeah, it's too bad that, I mean, he obviously has a talent for lecturing. I mean, he's a very entertaining storyteller. You know, so I mean, he's very YouTubeable, right? So it's unfortunate he can't be more accurate with his facts. Atun Shea has a really good video on a pre-Enlightenment witch hunting text, which is strikingly rationalist in its argumentation. Is that Demonology by King James? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. So yeah, but the point is rationalist in its argumentation. That's true. Yeah, that's how they were back then. I think you need to give. I think modern people. You know, it's hard to make the conceptual leap to be able to see things from within someone else's worldview. But I feel like you need to make the attempt to do that if you really want to understand the past and why people did things in the past. And modern day people really struggle with differentiating between the obvious kookiness and nonsense of a lot of the stuff people believed in the past about things like alchemy and magic and astrology and stuff, but differentiating that from the fact that that doesn't mean that they lacked critical thinking or that they weren't capable of reasoning. Reasoning itself does not necessarily lead you to the truth. It can, but reasoning, it depends on what inputs you give it. It's like with a computer, garbage in, garbage out. If you start out with a bunch of false assumptions and axioms, you're going to arrive at false conclusions. But it doesn't mean your reasoning process is any different from the reasoning process of a modern person who has the benefit of modern science and stuff. Difference between this guy and a Dan Carlin is I think Dan is really forthcoming with how he isn't a historian and shouldn't be treated as such. Yes, that's my issue here. I was mentioning this on Discord yesterday. Like PaxTube, because I, reacted to a PaxTube video a few months ago. He gets stuff wrong, but he's not claiming to be a historian. He is claiming that the stuff he's saying is accurate, which is unfortunate. But he obviously, like, the role he's filling is he's engaging in apologetics, right? This is a professor here. Dr. Roy Casagranda is a professor. And so he bears an extra layer of responsibility to make sure that he's being accurate with how he's presenting stuff, because people are going to trust him more readily than they're going to trust a guy like PaxTube. Like you watch a video on PaxTube's channel, he's got an agenda, he's got an angle, and so you are little bit more prepared to be cautious about accepting anything he says. But a lot of people are going to watch this and they'll be like, well, this guy has a PhD. He's an expert on the Middle East. He must know what he's talking about. It sounds, you know, he's saying it with such confidence, and he's a professor. So I feel like Dr. Roy Casagranda is more, I'm going to keep calling him that. Dr. Roy Casagranda, because he calls himself that, and it cracks me up. He always uses the word doctor. But Dr. Roy Casagranda, and by the way, it's Dr. Premodernist to you. Reminds me of when my wife and I was joking with my wife when my kids are born, I'm going to make them call me doctor. But, God, I forgot what I was going to say. Dr. Roy Casagranda bears an additional weight of responsibility of culpability for misleading people because of the role he's playing in society. During my time studying in Germany, I felt insisting on your title was true generally. Oh, yeah, maybe he's just being continental. If we were Catholics pre-Galileo, we would all believe heliocentrism is heresy, and we would all believe we rationally came to that conclusion. I have a whole thing about that I will eventually need to make a video about, but I firmly believe that geocentrism, given like without a telescope and without modern scientific equipment, geocentrism is the most rational conclusion. The only reason we can be so confident about heliocentrism is we have so much more access to knowledge because of our instrumentation, starting with the telescope and then all the other stuff since then.
They're not actually Normans, but they're part of the Norman sphere. So in a way, the top 4 of the 5 most important Crusaders are Normans. The 5th guy is a guy named Raymond. He's Raymond of Toulouse, also known as Raymond Saint-Gilles.
Okay, can I just take a minute? All right, it's my stream, so I'm going to be pedantic, okay? So it's Raymond of Toulouse. So he's trying to make it sound French. Here, I'm going to deconstruct what's happening here, all right, with the faux foreign thing, because Dr. Roy Casagranda is not the only guy who does this, all right? Other people do this too. So I just want to express this because I have a soapbox and I'm never going to be able to say this. I'm never going to be able to incorporate this into a YouTube video. But here's what happens here. The way he pronounced Toulouse. In French, it's Toulouse. In French, OU is ooh, ooh. It's the same ooh that you have in Spanish or Italian. It's the same ooh we have in English with a word like moon. It's ooh. Toulouse. It's the same, it's a vowel sound we have in English, so it doesn't sound foreign. French also has a vowel sound U, which is in IPA, I guess is represented with a Y, U. And there are a lot of words like au jus, jus. The word jus, for example, juice, has that vowel sound. And that's represented usually in French with a U, just a U by itself. So if you have OU, it's OO sound. If you have U, it's U sound. There's this big myth that French has this chaotic spelling. French spelling is not chaotic. It's very regular. It just happens to use oftentimes 2 or 3 letter combinations to represent a certain sound. But once you've learned all the combinations and all the correlations between this set of letters with this sound, once you've learned them, it's all very regular. You can encounter any new French word, you know exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced, which is, of course, very different from English. And not just English. Another myth is that English is the only language that has irregular spelling. That's not true. There are other languages that also have chaotic and irregular spelling, like Danish, for example. Anyway, in French words, if you see OU, it's an U sound. If you see a U by itself, it's an U sound, okay? So we as Americans, as English speakers, we know that French has these extra vowel sounds. And so we hear a sound like U, and we think, oh, that sounds very foreign. That sounds very French. That sounds not English. So if I want to, so now this is what's happening in Dr. Roy Casagranda's brain. He's thinking, okay, well, I want to make this sound French. So I'm not going to say Toulouse. I'm going to use the French vowel U, Toulouse. But he's saying it wrong because Toulouse. In French, it's pronounced Toulouse, not Toulouse. So he's trying to make it sound more French, but he's actually making it less French. And then the same thing with Saint-Gilles. It's Saint-Gilles. S-A-I-N-T is pronounced Saint, not Saint. But what he's doing here is he's taking the thing where you're an American. You don't know much about French. You know a tiny bit about French. You know that French has these nasal vowels, but you only know one nasal vowel, right? Because that's how we always make fun of French people. So that sound. So now he's like, well, I want to make sure I put that in there so it sounds French. So he says Saint-Gilles, but that's not how you say it in French. It's Saint-Gilles. It's the en nasal, not the on nasal. It's the wrong nasal vowel. So if you're gonna do it wrong, then don't bother. Just do it English. Let's just say Saint Gilles. Just do that, or Saint Giles. I don't know, or just say Raymond of Toulouse. You know, if you just want to avoid the Saint Gilles business. But, oh my gosh, it's really. But this is a pet peeve of mine. It's not just related to Dr. Roy Casagranda. It's in general. Like, I see this a lot with people who feel like, you know, they're kind of like get into their own heads and they're like, oh, it's a foreign name. I got to make sure I say it correctly. And then they make it worse. All right. I'm glad I got that off my chest. Thank you so much for helping me work through these feelings. All right. That's not why I was doing this segment, though. I was going to talk about there. Yeah. So there's something coming up. Okay, yeah, so let's keep going. My apologies for not keeping up with the chat.
He was on the 4th of Toulouse, and they show up, and Alexius, there's also Hugh de Vermandois, there's a few other guys, but I just want you to know those 5. They show up at Constantinople, and they swear an oath of fealty. Well, not Tankred, he refuses. He wants nothing to do with this. And what they promise is that all the land they capture will be handed to Alexius Comnenus, the Roman emperor. And of course, they're lying through their teeth. They have no intention.
Okay, so he's talking about when the crusade arrived, the Crusader leaders arrived at Constantinople, and what happened was they had to cross the Bosporus to go to Asia Minor to continue on their journey. And Alexius, the emperor, wanted to make sure that any lands that they conquered would be Roman or Byzantine, you know, because what they were doing is they were reconquering Byzantine territory. Because what happened was, prior to the First Crusade, the kind of the impetus for the First Crusade was that Asia Minor had been part of the Byzantine Empire, or what is now Turkey. And then a bunch of Turks invaded and gobbled up, you know, conquered almost all of that territory, all the way up to Nicaea. And Alexius wanted to gain that back, and so he had sent, oh yeah, and I forgot to mention this before, this is one of the mistakes that Dr. Roy Casagranda made. He said that Alexius traveled to Italy to meet with the Pope. That's not true. He did not travel to Italy, but he did send messengers requesting that Pope Urban II send soldiers, send warriors to Constantinople to help him regain that lost territory in Asia Minor. So when these Crusader leaders arrived in Constantinople, he wanted to make sure they were going to cede that territory back to him. What he did not want to have happen was the Turks conquer this territory from the Byzantines, and then these Western Franks show up, and then they just reconquer it and they keep it. And then the Byzantines don't get the territory back, right? So that's where Alexius is coming from. He doesn't want that to happen. So as the Crusader leaders arrived in Constantinople one by one with their armies, he would meet with them and he would tell them, I'm not going to ferry you across the Bosporus until you promise on oath, you swear an oath that you will, any lands you conquer will be mine. You know, they'll be Byzantine. So yeah, so that happened. But then Casagranda here says, oh, and they were lying through their teeth. Based on what? Okay, the traditional, like the conventional narrative, the narrative that I've consumed from reading Crusader historians, is that they took oaths very seriously. Like, one aspect of Western culture at the time, Western European culture, was oaths were extremely important. More important to them than they were to the Greeks. And they took oaths extremely seriously, and when they made an oath, they were going to die before they were going to break the oath, because it was so shameful in their culture to go back on an oath. That's why they were so reluctant to swear the oath. They were like, oh man, like this is going to bind me. This is going to like box me in. They did, most of them did agree to it. Raymond did not. He actually says at one point that Tankred was the one. I don't think that's true. I think Tankred did swear the oath. Maybe I need to go back and check. Raymond was the one who absolutely refused to swear the oath. But they arrived at some kind of compromise and he ferried him across anyway. But to just like, this is so misleading to be like, oh, they were just lying through their teeth. I'm just going to assume cynicism. That's the kind of a theme through this entire lecture. I'm just going to assume that everything that the Westerners did, the Western Europeans did, was motivated by cynicism and hypocrisy. I'm not going to check, I'm not going to try to verify that with anything. I'm just going to, that's my starting assumption. That seems to be his point of view. There was a break, but that came later. When the Crusaders were in Antioch, the Roman Emperor, the Byzantine Empire, Alexius, was coming to their assistance with a large Byzantine army. But then he heard that they were about to be destroyed by the Turks, because at this point the Crusaders were inside the city of Antioch, and the Turks had come and surrounded the city and laid siege. And it was a much larger Turkish force compared to the Crusader force. At least that's how it's reported. And when he found out that that was the case, he was like, "Oh, there's no point in going to their relief. They're dead meat. They're dead men walking." So he turned around and went back to Constantinople. And when the Crusaders heard that that had happened, they were like, "He betrayed us. He went back on his word," because part of this deal was he was going to help them, right, in the campaign. Now he's not helping them. He's not providing military assistance to this. So for them, Alexius was the one who broke his word, and therefore they were no longer bound by the oath. So then after this, like, they go on, the crusade succeeds, they create new Crusader states, and the Principality of Antioch is a vassal of the Byzantine Empire, but the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli are not. But that's not because they were lying through their teeth when they were in Constantinople. That's because they felt that they were betrayed by Alexius later on. Oh, I found your Twitch by snooping around your YouTube video description. You got after the videos more. I don't know. Maybe I will at some point. Maybe when I feel like I'm better at doing Twitch than I am. Like, I still don't know how to do anything, how to do any of this stuff. I obviously don't have any of the doodads that go across the screen and stuff. I haven't done any of that.
The Fatimids hated the Seljuks, but the Fatimids liked the Romans.
Okay, so he's talking about the geopolitics of the region. To the Byzantines, right? I should probably get rather than waving my hands around in the air, I should probably just get an actual map. Is there a map on the page for the First Crusade? Maybe this one. Maybe we'll use this map. All right. Is this showing up okay? All right. So here we can see the different routes that the Crusaders took. They went to Constantinople. They crossed Asia Minor. Oh, this is a French map. That's fun. Maybe I'll mispronounce all the words. All right, so then we come down the coast. They went to Antioch. There's Antioch. Then they went down along here, and they went to Jerusalem. Okay, so this is Jerusalem down here. Now, here was the Byzantine Empire, and this was the area that was recently conquered by the Turks within the past 25 years or so. They had conquered this area. And then over here, the Seljuks. This is called the Great Seljuks. Grand Seljukid. The Great Seljuks are over here, and then there were smaller Seljuk beyliks along here. Beylik is Turkish for principality. So little tiny little statelets along here, and then over here there was another Seljuk regime. And then down here in Egypt, there was a different regime called the Fatimids. and they were Shiite. Most of the population of Egypt at the time was Coptic Christian and Sunni Muslim, and then there was a fair-sized Jewish minority too, and then but the political elite ruling in Egypt at the time was a Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids. So here's what he's talking about now. He has the Byzantines up here, Seljuks over here, the Fatimids down here, and he said the Fatimids hate the Seljuks, but they love the Romans, the Byzantines. That's a gross oversimplification of things. And by the way, like, why do we feel the need? It's not just Dr. Roy Casagranda that's doing this, but I see this so often in the way people talk about historical conflict. They phrase it in terms of love and hate, right? People always love certain people. They hate, like, they'll talk about this in regard to Christian history, like talking about the Great Schism and like Rome and Constantinople and stuff. And it's like, we have to phrase it as they hated them. They hated each other. Arr. Why do we have to do it that way? Like, did they really hate them? Or did they just have a really strong disagreements? Aren't those two different things? Like, isn't it possible to disagree with someone without hating them? Isn't it possible to be leading, in the case of the Fatimids, be leading a country and feel like you have, like, you want to defend your territory against another country without hating them? I don't know why I have to like reduce it to that all the time. Right. Yeah. Osmium. I don't think Americans hate Russians on an existential level, even in the Cold War. Absolutely. During the Cold War, Americans did not hate Soviet citizens. They hated communism as a concept, as an ideology, but they didn't hate the Russians. Like, so that's my objection to this. Like, you're not doing a service to people by phrasing it in those terms. You're not helping the student understand what were the actual dynamics happening here. What was the actual issue? It makes it sound like petty school, like, politics, where you just, like, you're being petty with people, and you're like, it's just interpersonal issues rather than it being about principles or about material interest or stuff like that. That's why I object to it. You're not helping anybody by just calling it hate. Anyway. Right, so he's describing this. It's the Byzantines, the Seljuks, the Fatimids.
They were allies. So when this whole crusade thing happened, in the mind of the Fatimids, who had just lost Jerusalem to the Seljuks a few years earlier, what's going to happen is the Crusaders, who are technically in the service of the Roman Empire, are going to split that land. Syria will go to the Romans, Palestine will go to Egypt. That's what they're thinking.
Okay, so what he's saying is the Fatimid point of view at the time, in the 1090s, was, so the Fatimids had controlled Jerusalem. Then the Seljuks arrived, and they invaded the area, and they grabbed all these cities along the Levantine coast here, and pushed the Fatimids out of this area. This had been Fatimid-controlled territory before. You can see my cursor, right? So this area here had been under the Fatimids. The Seljuks came in and took that back. So he's saying in 1090, what is this, 1098, 1099, the Fatimids are thinking, we have an alliance with the Byzantines, and we're going to split this territory where we're going to come up from the south, and the Byzantines are going to come down from the north, and the Byzantines are going to conquer down to about here. And what's north of that line will be Byzantine territory, and what's south of that line will be Fatimid territory. I've never heard this before. I don't know where he's getting this. It is true that, like, if you look at the history of the Fatimids, there are some interesting diplomatic relationships between them and the Byzantines. But in the context of the First Crusade, that's not what was going on. And let's continue, though. He says
thinking is going to happen. So they decide, let's go grab Jerusalem from the Seljuks before the Crusaders arrive to do our part in this alliance. They have an explicit alliance with Rome. This isn't like they're speculating. This is the deal that they've made with Alexius.
Okay, and I don't want to say he definitely is, that this is definitely not true. I haven't been able to fact check this. I'm in the reading that I've done, I've never read that they had an explicit alliance with the Byzantines, which, by the way, like, that kind of makes Alexius look bad, not the Crusaders, because Alexius is literally sending the Crusaders down to Jerusalem, and apparently he has an active, explicit alliance with the Fatimids that he's going to acknowledge Jerusalem as Fatimid territory. So that's on Alexius, but I don't know. That sounds, I'm a little unsure about this, and the fact that he continues and he says some stuff where I can tell he's like mangling some information that helps make me even more skeptical.
Komnenos. And so they send an army, they defeat the Seljuks, they capture Jerusalem, and
that is true, by the way. So the Seljuks had conquered Jerusalem, and then in like 1071 or something, and then the Fatimids took it back in 1098, right before, like, within a year before the Crusaders had arrived. So when the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, it was actually under Fatimid control. There was a Fatimid garrison there.
And then they send an envoy to meet with the Crusaders, and the Crusaders just keep coming.
Yeah, so he says they sent an envoy. So the way he's phrasing it is, they have an explicit alliance with the Byzantines, where the Byzantines are going to recognize that they're splitting the Levant, and Jerusalem is going to be in Fatimid territory. And so when they see the Crusaders coming, they send an envoy to talk to the Crusaders with that context. No, here's what happened. They saw the Crusaders coming, and they're like, let's see if we can steer them toward the Seljuks. So they sent an envoy to negotiate with them and be like, okay, how about you guys, and we'll help you. Let's all go fight the Seljuks. And then we'll give you pilgrimage rights in Jerusalem. You'll be able to visit Jerusalem freely, right? That's what they were proposing. And the Crusaders said no, because the point of the crusade was to establish Jerusalem as a city under Christian rule. So they would not be accomplishing that purpose by making that treaty. Okay, so anyway.
And the Egyptians are like, what are you doing? No, you stay on that side of that's the deal. We're going to split this. And the Crusaders just keep coming, and it becomes clear to the Fatimids, they're going to fight. They're allies. So they dig in, and that's when the siege equipment comes, and the Crusaders break in, and the Egyptian the Egyptian general in command of the defense of Jerusalem, Iftikhar, is looking at this going, how do I fight this now that the Crusaders have a sectional wall? And so he retreats his men to the citadel. Once they're in the citadel, there's nothing he can do for the population of Jerusalem. All he can do is he can hold on. It's basically a thorn in their side. He's going to make it so that the Crusaders can't control Jerusalem, but they can control parts of Jerusalem, and he won't control any of the merchant part of Jerusalem, the commerce part of Jerusalem. He'll just have a military peace, and eventually he'll run out of supplies. And their goal is to fight to the death. There's no point. They saw what happened at Ma'ara, and they saw what happened at Antioch. They know who the Crusaders.
Oh, yeah. So I skipped over those parts, but he says when the Crusaders took over Antioch, they killed everybody, which I don't think that's true. They did kill the garrison there, but then they went to Ma'ara. There's this famous event in Ma'ara. I skipped over that part of it. Ma'ara's famous because that's when cannibalism happened. And so it's this very sensational, it's a sensationalized aspect of the Crusades. But they killed all the people in Ma'ara. At least that's, they did do a massacre at Ma'ara. Actually, I think I mentioned this when I did the Pax Tube reaction, where I said that this was like in the conduct of war at the time, in both the Islamic world and in the Christian world, when a war happened and you laid siege to a city, if you came to terms and negotiated with the people, to take the city peacefully, then you would not kill the people in the city. You would spare their lives, and they might be able to keep some of their possessions. Like, for example, sometimes they would negotiate where you can carry, like, I remember this one incident in the 16th century in Central Asia where they had negotiated where, like, the Turkish garrison was allowed to leave, but they could only leave carrying whatever they could carry on their backs. They couldn't keep anything else. That would be a pretty typical kind of arrangement. Or you pay some ransom or something like that. But the rules were, if the city negotiates and gives up peacefully, then they're spared. But if the attacking army storms the walls and has to take the city by force, which is extremely dangerous, and you lose a lot of men doing that because you're going through this very, like, the defender has the advantage in that scenario. So if that happens, then there's no protection. They could go around killing whoever. And that was standardly done. It was commonly done. And it wasn't unique. Sometimes people talk about it like that's unique to the Crusades or even unique to the sack of Jerusalem, but it was not unique at all. For example, I haven't gotten to the part where they're killing people in the Dome of the Rock yet, but 20 years before this, when Jerusalem was under Seljuk control, there was a rebellion, and the Seljuks came and attacked the city, and they committed a massacre in the city, and they went into the Dome of the Rock. There were a bunch of Muslims hiding in the Dome of the Rock, and they killed all the Muslims in the Dome of the Rock. Literally the same thing the Crusaders did 20 years later. And it's both of them are bad. I'm not trying to defend any of them. I'm just saying, let's contextualize what happened. This was how wars took place. You can say it was still bad, fine, but that's the context. And what happened in Jerusalem in 1099, like, that's the same as what happened in 1077, right? Because that's what happened. In the cases of Antioch and Ma'ara, those were cities that were taken by force. And so they committed violence once they took the city. On other occasions, when the city was taken peacefully, they did not harm the population. For example, Nicaea. So when the First Crusade went to Nicaea, they laid siege to it. The Byzantines were able to negotiate for the Nicaeans to surrender. They surrendered. The people of Nicaea were not harmed. After Antioch, when the Crusaders were going down the coast, the cities along the coast made peace with the Crusaders, and so they were not harmed. They were not massacred. That was the rules of war. If you made peace with the attacker, you were not harmed. If you fought, if you held out because you thought you could withstand them and outlast them, then you were taking a gamble if you did that. But the way he's talking about this here, it makes it sound as if the Crusaders were determined to massacre everybody no matter what. So he's talking about the Fatimid garrison, which had retreated to the citadel of David, and they negotiated. What happened was they negotiated with the Crusaders after the storming had started, and they agreed that they would be allowed. I think they had to pay a ransom, and then they would be allowed to go free. But the way he's characterizing this here, he's saying they saw what had happened in Antioch and Ma'ara, so they know that they're going to be massacred no matter what. But that's not true. Those weren't the rules of war at the time. It wasn't you're going to be massacred no matter what. It was if you hold out and fight, then you will be massacred no matter what. But if you come to terms, if you negotiate a peaceful surrender, you won't be killed. And the fact is that the garrison, they negotiated a release. They agreed not to fight. They were going to leave. They all left peacefully. They were not harmed, and they went to Ascalon, which was still under Fatimid control. Yeah, so that was Iftikhar. Oh yeah, and we have some more from Jerusalem stuff. If they killed all of them, then what people was Bohemond ruling over? Yeah, he makes a crack like that. Have you seen this? Because he talks about that when he talked about the Antioch part. Because Bohemond was the one who got Antioch, and he makes this little crack at the end of that little segment where he's like, "Yeah, Bohemond got it, but what was he had killed everybody in the city, so what was he even getting?" They did not kill everybody. Like when they would capture a city, they typically did not massacre every single person in the city. Now, when people talk about the sack of Jerusalem in 1099, they will often say they massacred everybody in the city, but they didn't. I mean, if we're going to trust the primary sources, the same sources that tell us there was a general massacre, the same sources that tell us that they massacred people in the Dome of the Rock, those same sources also tell us that only some of the people in Jerusalem were killed. The same sources that tell us that there were dead bodies and body parts strewn about the streets, those same sources are the ones that tell us that the surviving Muslims were forced to haul the bodies out of the city to a pile to be burnt. So if we're going to trust the sources when they tell us that there was a general massacre, like when a lot of people were killed and there was all this violence, if we're going to trust those sources for that, why aren't we trusting those very same sources when they tell us that there were survivors? Okay, yeah, let me keep going. I totally am not keeping up with chat, so my apologies.
They're supposed to be allies. They're being backstabbed. They get it. But the Crusaders really want the city, and so they start negotiating. And the deal that they come up with, Raymond Saint-Gilles comes up with, is the following.
Raymond.
That the Egyptians will leave in groups of 5. They'll leave the citadel, and then they'll exit the city 5 at a time. That way, if the Crusaders break their word, turn on them, they'll only kill those 5 dudes who are in the middle of leaving, and then the guys that are still in the citadel they can just keep fighting. And anybody who escaped has already escaped. And that's the deal. So the first 5 go, and then another 5, and another 5. And the last 5 were like, oh God, they're going to turn on us, but they don't. And the last 5 get away. And then the Crusaders go over to the gate.
I've never heard this before. I went back and checked. I was like, whoa, did I miss something? So I was going back and looking at my books. Like the surrender of the citadel, that's reported by some of the sources, but I don't know where this 5 at a time thing comes from. And when I first watched this, I was like, well, he must have read this somewhere. There must be something that says this somewhere, but I haven't seen it. But in retrospect, I'm not sure. I'll come to that later on. But anyway, he tells us this story of 5 at a time, and I don't know if it's true or not.
And they close it.
Okay, yeah, and then he's very dramatic here.
And then the Crusaders go over to the gate, and they close it. They go over to the Muslim quarter, and they just begin murdering everybody. They're just walking through the city, slaughtering person after person. Tankred, the guy that
well, I'm not going to defend the practice of what happens to a city when it's sacked. That was it. You don't want to be in a city during a sack. You don't. It sucks. But the way it's described, if we're going to be precise about it, the way it's described in the sources, at least the way I was reading it, maybe I need to study it some more. They focus more on like the shape of the battle as it was carrying on. So the defenders retreated. Of course, obviously the garrison got away, but the other defenders in the city were retreating to the Temple Mount, and so there was fighting in the streets going toward the Temple Mount. That's what the sources say. The sources, at least the sources I've seen, don't actually say they went door to door. He doesn't say door to door here, but they went like down each street, and everybody they saw they killed. A lot of people were not killed, and they would talk. Like I said, they talk about survivors too.
Talked about
Tankred. So he's here.
The guy that I talked about.
He's telling a little story about Tankred.
Person after person. Tankred, the guy that I talked about, with the strategic mind who kept running into trouble with Balduin until Balduin took Edessa. He can't take it. He's like, what are we doing? He runs over to a group of Muslims who were running, and he's like, whoa, whoa, I'm not going to kill you. He hands them his banner, and he says, if Crusaders approach you, say you're with Tankred, and show them my banner, and they won't harm you. And they're, of course, grateful. And then he just sort of runs around the city trying to figure out what to loot and how to save people's lives.
Okay, so he's doing a lot of creative embellishment here. What we know, like, it comes from, I think it comes from the Gesta. Maybe I won't try to find it right now, but I think it comes from the Gesta Francorum. But yeah, there is a brief story in there, or not story even, but a brief report that Tankred gave his banner, Tankred and another nobleman, gave his banner to a bunch of people who were hiding in the Dome of the Rock. And the way it's, I'm kind of tempted to just read the whole account so you can contrast what it said. Actually, maybe I will. You can hear how it is in the source versus how Casagranda talks about. I wonder if I could find it quickly. I can't find it off the... But basically what happens is he gives him the banner, and then time passes, and later on, they get killed. Some of the Crusaders go up, and they're fighting. They actually go up on the roof and fighting them there. And then Tankred comes, and he's really angry. And that's all it says. So it doesn't say what his mindset was. So that's Casagranda's embellishment. He's assuming, or he's creating this story where Tankred is feeling moral remorse. You know, what are we doing? That's not in the source. That's him. That's Casagranda. It's kind of historical fiction, which honestly I don't think belongs in a history lecture. I think he's going too far. I totally sympathize with the idea of you want to humanize the story because it makes it more interesting. You want to, like, an important thing about a story is you need to have motive, right? You need your characters to have motive. And the most frustrating thing, one of the most, not the most frustrating thing, there's another thing that's more frustrating, but a very frustrating thing about historical source material, especially for the medieval period and earlier, is that they virtually never tell you what anyone's motive is for anything. They just tell you what happened. And then it's up to you as the reader, it's left to as an exercise to the reader, for the reader, to figure out what everybody's motives were for the stuff that they did. This, by the way, is part of why you can have so many different interpretations for historical events. It's because the sources themselves don't tell us why anything happened. And so whenever a historian tries to figure out what happened or reconstruct or speculate about what happened, there's always another way of explaining it. There's always another perspective on what someone's motives were. So that's what he's engaging in here. We have the account that says that he gave them the banner and then later on they were killed. And then he was angry. Those are the little bits of information that are given to us from that one source. But why did he give them the banner? Why were they killed anyway, in spite of the fact that they had the banner? What specifically was it that he was angry about? None of that is actually elucidated in the source. And for I mentioned I saw on Discord yesterday or today, I was like I have gaps too. I have gaps in my knowledge. Sometimes it's because I haven't read enough on the topic. Sometimes it's because no one will ever know. And when I would give a lecture, I just would not fill in the blanks. I just wouldn't report that. And if it was something that I don't know or I can't explain or whatever, I would just skip over that. But he feels like he has the right to fill in the details out of his imagination in a history class. Anyway,
he hasn't given up the looting. Don't be naive about this. But he's also like, let's not just murder everybody. And he describes in his own memoir later on coming upon that group of Muslims
Oh, it wasn't his memoir. But
Muslims
anyway.
laying there dead on his bloody banner. Like the Crusaders didn't.
Unless he had a memoir and I don't know about it, honestly. Maybe he wrote a memoir and he talks about seeing them on a bloody banner. But at this point, I've like going through this whole lecture and seeing how many times he embellished the truth for the sake of a good story. I can't help but feel when I get to something like this, like earlier on in the video when I was watching and he would be saying stuff and I'd be like that thing where the Pope would have his child on his knee, right? And I'm like, where did he get that? Maybe he got that from some weird Victorian era thing, or like, you know, but like the further along we go, the less and less I have faith that he's actually. Anyway, keep going.
Even care. They're just like, you're with Tankred?
I know. Medieval noble's famous for writing. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know about Tankred himself, but imagine a medieval Norman being like, I really want to sit down and write my memoir. That would be unusual. We have very few memoirs, or anything that's written that even feels like a memoir is even memoir-esque. It's very rare. So, but I don't want to say that there definitely is no Tankred memoir. I don't want to say that because I don't know.
Christian
so then
quarters.
Okay, well, I forgot to mention this. So he talks about the Muslim quarter, Jewish quarter, Christian quarters. I don't know if those existed in the Fatimid period. As far I was under the impression, like nowadays, if you go to Jerusalem and the old quarter in the old city, there are 4 quarters. There's a Muslim quarter, a Jewish quarter, an Armenian quarter, and a Christian quarter. And the Armenians are Christians, so that means there are 2 Christian quarters. But the Armenian quarter is like special. It's Armenian or whatever. I was under the impression, and honestly, I don't remember where I got this impression, but for some reason I thought that dated from the Ottoman period, from like 16th, 17th centuries. I thought that's when that happened. I was not aware that those 4 quarters existed at the time of the Crusades. But maybe I'm wrong, or not even wrong. Maybe I'm just like, I'm not saying I'm not going to die on this hill. I was just like, I was unaware of this, and I'm curious. I'm curious about this. I feel like he must just be assuming that there were quarters, that those quarters were the quarters, because, you know, just based on his track record, I feel like he's just assuming that. But I'm kind of taking that with a grain of salt. I'm a little bit skeptical. I guess I'm reserving judgment here. Because I don't believe those quarters existed back then. But anyway, he says that they went through the Muslim quarter and killed everybody. They went to the Jewish quarter and killed everybody. And then they go to the Christian quarters, and there were 2 of them, or because there are 2 now, Christian quarter and Armenian quarter. So the Crusaders are going to the Christian quarters now.
And of course, at this point, the Christian population is peeing itself because it's just watched half the city get exterminated. And they go, you have the true cross, where is it? And the Christians go, we're not telling you. You're savages. And the Crusaders go, okay, we got you. And they start murdering the Christian clergy. They're like, who's a priest? Let's have your priest. And they just start slaughtering the priests. And they're like, when we're done, we're going to do the deacons. And then we're going to start working on your families. Eventually, somebody tells them, here's the true cross, please stop killing us. And they stop massacring the Christians as well. But then they turn to the Christians and go, remember that great schism in 1058? These Catholic priests are your new priests. Get used to it. We're not doing that anymore. Your Orthodox ways are out. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And that's how the Crusaders captured Jerusalem.
All right. Did you hear all that? Okay, this is important. He told this whole story about how they went to the Christian quarters. Christians were scared. They were like, give us the true cross. They said no, so they start killing the bishops and priests. Did you hear all that? And he has this whole dialogue back and forth. We're like, give us the true cross. We're not going to give you the true cross. And blah, 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 all this stuff. And once we're done with the priests, we're going to kill the deacons. And once we're doing the deacons, we're going to kill the families. All right, here's what happened. When the Crusader army was approaching Jerusalem, the Fatimid emir who was commanding the city, expelled all the Christians from Jerusalem. So there were no Christians in Jerusalem at the time of the siege or the sack. So how long was this anecdote? It was like...
And the Crusaders go, okay.
Yeah, that's like more than a minute long.
Into a church. Let's do like those Muslims did. We'll die.
Yeah, it's more than a minute. Yeah, he freaking made it up, Oberstan. He made it up. He made up that whole thing. I was so freaking pissed off when I saw that part, because then it became crystal clear to me. What's that guy's name? I can never remember that guy's name. Iftikhar ad-Dawla. Iftikhar ad-Dawla had expelled the Christians from the city. The Christian quarters, assuming Christian quarters, they would have been empty. He made up this entire story out of his freaking head. He invented it. He had a dream, bro. He dreamed it up. And he goes into a classroom with a bunch of students and lectures and tells them this happened as if it's real. He's committing educational malpractice. This is when I got really pissed. And then I went on Discord. If you were on Discord yesterday and you saw me, I went on there and I was like, this guy, these videos are garbage. I was so angry because then this is when it became clear to me. All the way up, all along here, I was watching this lecture, and I was like, he was giving these little anecdotes and saying these little things and being like, the Pope had the kid on his knee and they let the garrison out 5 at a time and they had these little stories. And I was like, man, I've never heard that before. I don't know. I guess he just read that somewhere. Now it becomes clear to me he's freaking making it all up. He probably made up the thing about the Pope with the kid on his knee. He probably made it up. He probably made it up. The story of letting the garrison out 5 at a time. I couldn't find that in the sources. He probably invented it. He's like, the whole thing is historical fiction. This entire lecture is just him riffing. With, like, he's doing creative writing in his history class, in his history lecture. This is really bad. This is really unacceptable. Okay. I'm done. Like, that's when a switch went off for me. Like, this guy is not just making honest mistakes. He's not just getting some of the facts wrong because he's relying on fictional, historical myths, and he's outside of his field or whatever. That's not the issue here. I mean, it's part of it. Some of the stuff he's saying, it's part of it, like his stuff about celibacy in the medieval church. But it's when he's like making it up. He's inventing it. He's fictionalizing it. Completely. That entire dialogue, he has this whole dialogue and he made it up. So no, yeah, I don't have like we were talking earlier, like I don't have mixed feelings about this guy. No, I don't have mixed feelings about him at all now. This guy's a freaking liar. He's lying. He's inventing this stuff and presenting it as if it happened. It's lying. He's lying. Oh my gosh. Like it's just so irresponsible to get up in front of your students and just tell them stories like this. And this goes back, remember what I was saying about the Sykes-Picot, somebody sneezed and the line, I was talking about that. That was back in minute 45 where he's like, they're drawing the boundaries in the Middle East and somebody sneezes and stuff. And you hear that and you're like, okay, he's making a funny, he's just joking around. Obviously, that's not why the boundaries are that way. But now, like, I can't tell. Maybe he thinks that actually happened. Like, if he thinks this happened because he dreamed it, like, where's the boundary between reality and, like, imagination for this guy? How can he not tell the difference? I mean, does he know he's lying? Does he know that this dialogue, this exchange that's supposed to have happened in the Christian quarter of Jerusalem, that it never happened? Like, does he know that? Does he know that he's making it up? Or does he think that his world of imagination is real? That if he imagines it playing out that way, could that be an explanation for why he's so confident in the way he talks about this stuff? When he's rattling off all these anecdotes, and he's so confident with every single one of them, and they're not real, is that what it is? Can he just not tell the difference between reality and his own fiction? How does this guy have a PhD? You'd be surprised. The Sykes-Picot sneeze is real. You'd be surprised. Like, you don't know until you go to grad school. You don't realize the wide range of abilities of your fellow students, and you can get a PhD without being smart. That's one of the great myths of modern life, is that people think, oh, if you have a PhD, that means you're really smart. I mean, in certain very particular ways, I guess it can mean you're smart. Like, smart in the sense that you're able to write a really long piece of paper, like a really long academic paper. You can do that. You can BS your way through a seminar and pretend you read the book. Like, that's a skill you learn in grad school. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily, it doesn't mean that you have critical thinking skills, or that you're able to really think through a problem in a very rational and critical way. This guy's superpower is perfect wish fulfillment, maybe. Only man, seeing him have a PhD gives me hope that I'll be accepted in grad school despite my bad GPA. Dad, don't worry about it. You are fine. You are fine, man. You don't have to, I mean, obviously they have the hurdle at the beginning to get accepted. And they might rule out an application because the GPA is low or whatever. But if you get through and get into grad school, the fact that you had a low GPA in undergrad will not hurt you necessarily. It's not necessarily going to mean that you're not going to do well in grad school. TYCJ, obtaining a degree in modern times is absolutely not super difficult. Yep. Yeah, earned both bachelor's and master's with ease, and they were from universities that are considered quite good across the U.S. It's true. Like, there is an amount of work and effort. Like, you do have to do a certain amount of effort, but it's not necessarily intellectually going to be a problem. Maybe if you're trying to do something like physics or philosophy or something like that, I don't know. But history, there is a certain amount, there's a portion of historical writing, like academic work that gets published that is not good quality. A lot of it does get caught through the filter of peer review, but some of it does get through. Because the peer reviewers are not, they're of average intelligence just like everybody else in academia is. And so, yeah, sometimes shoddy work gets through. It just does. Sometimes. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, therefore, we can ignore the scholarly consensus, or we can ignore what scholars write or whatever. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there is room for the underachievers. There is room for the BSers. There is a place for them in academia. They can get into academia and they can find a place for themselves. They're not going to be the top names in their field necessarily, but yeah. And also, I'll just say this: there's no correlation, or I guess I would say there's probably weak correlation between the quality of someone's research and the prestige of the university they're associated with. So don't let that dissuade you either. Yeah, exactly. Grad school isn't a magic environment where people aren't like that. Absolutely. They are the same as everybody else. There are some scholars in Paraguay that promote the idea that Vikings came to the country. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Grad school scares me as a first-year undergrad. Well, I mean, you have to work your way up to that, because you do have to write long-form but the people, you have to be able to have the stamina or whatever to be able to get all the pages out, but the pages, like the papers that people write in grad school, are not necessarily of good quality, you know, and they are in grad school writing that stuff, and it's not necessarily good quality. Yeah. All right. So, I was going to stop with in terms of the video. I don't have any more to go over. Because I got to that point and I snapped. So I was like, I can't handle it anymore. But after this, he talks about, they set up the kingdom of Jerusalem and stuff and whatever. But honestly, I didn't finish the video. I stopped there. I had enough. We can react to part 2. I don't think I want to watch any more First Crusades content, honestly. There is this other video, how Islam saved Western civilization. I was talking about this on Discord this morning because I started watching it. And in the first 7 minutes, he talks about the Council of Nicaea and gets everything wrong. But that's as far, you can see where I got to minute 7. You're like, this is all I've seen in this video so far. I don't know what else he says. But I was like, even by that, I was like, come on, guy. But that helped me, like the sheer degree to the sheer, it's not just he's getting it wrong. I don't want people to misunderstand me. I'm not mad that he's mistaken. I'm mad at how brazen it is and how he's obviously making stuff up. And then with this one, I'll just mention this one briefly. I don't know if I'll ever do a reaction on this video ever, but let's just watch this part so I can talk about this a second. Just so I can, I don't know, because it's on my mind. How do I do this? How does this work? Theater mode. Okay.
Church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, and he handed them to the priest, and the priest went, "Oh, I know what these are. These are the 26
the stuff
Apocrypha."
about the Bible, biblical canon's all wrong. We'll skip
and the
that.
Coptic Church rejects the rejection of the 26 Apocrypha. Apocrypha means that they're wrong. At Nicaea, the 318 also...
Yeah, notice he's... Oh, I said this before. He's pronouncing it Nicaea, but this was a few months earlier. This is before the Nicaea lobby got
had a conversation about one other problem. And the problem was how to understand Christ's nature on earth. If he was...
Right, so he's talking about the Council of Nicaea, and he says there are 2 things, as I recall, because I watched this morning, there were 2 things that the Council of Nicaea did. First of all, they established the canon. I think that's what he says, which is a myth. That's not what happened at the Council of Nicaea. And then secondly, he says they talked about the nature of Christ, this theological question.
One other problem. And the problem was how to understand Christ's nature on earth. If he was God, then how did he manage sin, for example? There was a guy named Arius of Alexandria. He was actually from Cyrenaica. Long story. He was living in Alexandria. That's where he made his career. Arius of Alexandria went, here's my suggestion. Jesus was God, pure God, total God. As a result, he was never tempted. Done. No sin. But the majority said, no, that's wrong. Jesus was God in a man's body. The body was tempted. Therefore, he did experience what it would be like to be tempted, but because he was God, he overcame it, and there was no sin. That became Orthodox doctrine. The other part became heresy.
So it is true the Council of Nicaea was motivated in large part because of what was happening with this Arius issue in Alexandria, in the city of Alexandria. There was a bishop named Alexander, and then there was a priest named Arius. Arius was saying some stuff that disagreed with what Alexander was saying, and this became a big controversy in the church. But the way he describes Arius's ideas are the exact opposite or not the exact opposite, but very different from what it was. He says that Arius taught that Jesus was just God and not man. And then Arius, well, I 3-hour stream. I'm just finishing up all the stuff I watched. I'm just talking about all the Casagranda stuff I watched. It's just get it all out. This is the last thing I saw from Casagranda. Sorry, Dr. Roy Casagranda. So the issue for Arius in reality was God created Christ first, created the Son first before the creation of the world. So Christ was God's first creature. The first thing God created was Jesus Christ. That was the sticking point. It was not that, like, so he says, Arius said Jesus was not man at all. He was just God and only he's basically Docetist is the name of that version of Christianity. And then what he actually taught was that Jesus was a human and lesser than God. So he's completely wrong about Arius. And this is a really basic, I understand if you're not like, if you haven't read anything about Christian history or Christian theology, whatever, it might seem a little bit nuanced or, kind of a little bit fine-grained. But if you're going to teach about the Council of Nicaea and the Aryan controversy, this is the most basic of basic facts, is what was Arius's position and how did he disagree with Alexander? That is like so fundamental. It's so basic. It's like saying that the American Revolution happened because the Americans wanted more king. They didn't have enough king. They were mad that Parliament was... honestly, I'm not exaggerating. This is exactly the kind of mistake that he's making. Imagine a Dr. Roy Casagranda 1,000 years from now saying, this is why the American Revolution happened. The Americans were angry that the British people were giving more power to Parliament, and they believed that the king should be more powerful. And so therefore they rebelled. And then when they created their new republic, they created a constitution with a very strong president because they believed in strong executive power. Right? And they were mad that Parliament had so much power, so they wanted to make sure Congress didn't have as much power. That's exactly the kind of bonkers, nonsense narrative that he's doing, talking about the ancient world in the Middle Ages. It's just so weird and out there. And like, obviously, he doesn't know the material very well, and then he's filling the gaps up with a bunch of just weird, bizarre ideas. They're just like so divorced from reality. That's what he's doing here with the Aryan controversy. He's saying the Arians taught the opposite of what he taught. Why is he even talking about the Aryan controversy? I mentioned this on Discord, but this is so weird to me. I feel like I'm slowly approaching understanding what is actually going on in this guy's mind. Like, why? What would possess him to give a talk about how Islam saved Western civilization and be like, I'm going to start by talking about the Council of Nicaea, which is before Islam happened, right? Like, he doesn't need to talk about it. It may be that, actually, I don't know where this is going because I didn't watch the full video, and I can't predict where this is going to go. But somehow the Council of Nicaea relates to other stuff that will eventually be relevant to. I remember what this was, actually. What the context here, he started out talking about the book that came out a long time ago called How the Irish Saved Civilization. He said, I don't like that book. I don't agree with it. And he said, part of the reason is the Irish, when they sent missionaries to the continent, they were actually converting Aryans. And so that sends them off this whole spiel talking about the Aryans and what the Aryans were all about. I'm like, you don't need any of that in your talk. You don't need to talk about this if you're talking about how Islam saved Western civilization. This is not necessary. So, like, it's one thing if you're going to go off on this tangent, but it's a tangent about a topic you know really well, and, like, maybe it's relevant to the topic, maybe it isn't, but at least you know it really well, He's going off on a tangent to talk about this topic that he does not know well at all. He knows very poorly. He doesn't know this material. So, like, I'm just thinking about this from the point of view of like, as a lecturer, as a former lecturer, I'm thinking about like what's the logic here? Because when I'm getting ready to give a lecture, when I would get ready to give a lecture, like there's a lot of prep involved. There's a lot of stuff you have to learn. If it's new material, if you're teaching a new course, if you're teaching a new, like you're creating this course from scratch and you're teaching this stuff for the first time, there's a lot of new stuff you have to learn. And I was always like, I could always tell when I did not know the topic at all, when I knew the topic a little bit, but I could easily make a mistake on, versus like, this is a topic I'm pretty familiar with. I've studied this before. I've taught this before. Maybe I learned about this in grad school in a seminar or something. I have some grounding in this particular area, so I can talk about this, I feel like this guy doesn't have any way of telling when he's in which category. Like I feel like he can't tell the difference between knowing a topic and not knowing a topic. Because, like, how else, like, I don't understand how he thinks he can teach this segment on the Aryan controversy. Why does he think he's familiar with it? Why does he think he knows? Because, like, it's just like, how did he get why is he teaching Docetism here and saying Aryan was a Docetist? It's just, like, you have to really not know the topic. And I don't want people to misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing him for not being familiar with the Aryan controversy. There's no reason why a guy who does modern Middle East politics needs to know anything about the Aryan heresy or the Aryan controversy or the Council of Nicaea. It's way outside of his field. I would not expect him to know anything about that. What gets me is he doesn't know it, but he's gonna teach it anyway. Like, he's not even going to try to learn it first. He's just going to go up there and start saying stuff. I'm so curious about his prep process. Like how is it when he's prepping for a lecture? How does he know when he's knows the material well enough to be able to relate it in class? Like, for me, it was like, I would be like, okay, I learned this material. Okay, can I represent this from memory? What if somebody asked me a question? I would try to anticipate questions, and I would dig a little bit deeper. And of course, students never ask questions, so like, I never did that. The prep was always in vain, usually. But I felt like I had a sense of when I'm on firm ground or when I'm on really shaky ground. And a lot of times when it's new material or I'm getting into a new subject. Like the first time I taught World War II, for example, I was on very shaky ground, and I had very much a sense of my own inadequacy to cover the material. I don't think he has that sense. I don't think he has anything in his brain that says, oh, I'm on shaky ground right now. I feel like he just has 100% confidence all the time about every subject he's talking about, no matter what, no matter how little he's read about it. He feels completely confident that he can talk about that. I don't understand. What's going on. Oh yeah, I want to see this guy talk in his actual field. Yeah, and he's probably more accurate, honestly. But I don't know his field that well. Here's my issue. I don't know his field that well. But now my trust has been completely broken after watching his lecture on the Crusades. It's not just, and again, let me be clear. It's not just that he got some material wrong. It's that he's clearly making stuff up on purpose and then representing it as history. And then here with this case where he has this, like, the world's biggest case of Dunning-Kruger, where he clearly, he doesn't know the Aryan heresy. He doesn't know what happened there. And he's just going full speed ahead, presenting the Aryan controversy. Like, what the heck? Like that, like, it's that mindset. It's like he has this mindset when he's teaching this. So then if I watch him give a lecture on, I don't know exactly what aspect of the modern Middle East he would be good at. Arab-Israeli conflict, I don't know. But if he's talking about something in modern Middle East, I would not know whether I can trust him. You know? All right, so that's it. I watched these few minutes of this second video, How Islam Saved Western Civilization, this morning, because I was like, well, I want to see what he says about other stuff. Ibn Sina on Discord, I think he was the one that was like talking about these two videos and wanted me to say something about them. So I wanted to check this video and see, like, so is this one any different?